Dovid Efune is in our New York City studio right now. He's an expert on what's going on in Israel. And I know that it's kind of a complicated situation for many people out there right now. So, Dovid, what can you tell us about the absolute latest? What should we expect? Is this a situation where Iran, Lebanon, and their terror allies strike, you think, in the next few days? Is it something that stretches weeks? What happens now?
Well, good to be with you, Clay. What we're seeing now in response to a series of really heinous attacks over the last number of months on innocent Israelis by Iran and its terror proxies is probably what you could best describe as a hellstorm of Israeli comeuppance that Iran and its terror proxies are facing. You've seen the deputy head of Hezbollah in Beirut assassinated, the head of the Politburo of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, assassinated in Tehran, and also confirmation that Mohammed Diaf, the terror mastermind, was indeed assassinated in the Gaza Strip. You know, the Israelis sometimes lose focus, and perhaps that was what happened in the years and months that led up to the attacks on October 7th. But when they are focused at eradicating their enemies, my God, they're good.
No doubt. And when you look at this situation, I mean, we're 10 months basically since everything took place in the October 7th attack. This feels quite clearly from a U.S. perspective that this is going to extend into our election cycle. What do you think, and again, you're the publisher of the New York Sun, by the way, for people who don't know, what do you think Israelis think of our upcoming election and the potential outcome now if Kamala Harris is the nominee versus if Donald Trump is the nominee? How much of an impact, if Netanyahu were being honest with us, does he think the selection of our next president will have when it comes to Israel's ability to defend itself in the Middle East?
I mean, it has a very significant impact, and more than anything, it has a significant impact on the strength of U.S.-Israel relations. I mean, the truth is that meddling in the Middle East and Israeli affairs is old news when it comes to American administrations, by the way, on both sides of the aisle, both Democrats and Republicans. I mean, it was President George Bush really pressured or cajoled Ariel Sharon to pull out of Gaza in the first place in 2005, and then Condoleezza Rice insisted that they allow Hamas to run in elections in 2007. So meddling in the Middle East is old news for all administrations. The truth is that the administration of Donald Trump was really the only administration in history that deferred more to the Israelis and said, look, we're an ally. We're here to support you. Let us know what's helpful and how we can be helpful. Of course, they weighed in and they had their perspective and their opinions on things, but they were really supportive in that way. So I think it would make a huge difference. A Donald Trump administration would be very supportive of Israel's efforts now to reestablish security on its borders, and Kamala Harris administration would wildly meddle, to say the least.
No doubt. As you sort of contemplate that playing out there, what's Israel's move now? This seems to have spiraled potentially into a larger Middle Eastern upfront battle instead of just Iran using so many of these terror groups as proxies. Do you think we're in danger of this spiraling, or do you believe the targeted attacks that Israel carried out to eliminate many of those terror assets has actually given the potential of this getting dialed back in significance? Where are we in terms of trying to exactly examine where the conflagration goes from here?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, but conventional wisdom always says, and if you look at the history of Joe Biden's approach to foreign policy, it's always de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. Of course, the age-old lesson of Churchill is that it doesn't always work that way, and you end up empowering your enemies in doing so, and particularly in the Middle East. I mean, that really is how it works. I mean, the only time that Iran ever suspended its nuclear program was when the United States was militarily active in both Afghanistan and Iraq on its borders, and then it got nervous. And I think although the conventional wisdom, what you're going to hear from all the talking heads now is, well, Israel has dramatically escalated and the Iranians are going to be upset now and they're going to bite back. Sure, they're going to make a show of it, and you're going to hear a lot of saber rattling and rhetoric. But in the end of the day, there are some folks that are really, really nervous. I mean, to have the ability to pull off what the Israelis have, it just tells every single level of leadership in Iran and in all of its terror proxies that nobody is safe and that the gloves are off. So I would say that the chances are that, rhetoric aside, and there'll probably be some kind of symbolic, reprisal attack, which won't cause that much damage, and we'll know about it in advance. Rhetoric aside, I think it actually does a lot to put these guys in their place. And also,
a lot of the
yeah.
No, sorry, I was going to cut you off. A lot of the attention had been on Hamas. Suddenly, the attention is on Hezbollah. How does this end? I mean, we know that this is not going to end in the context of suddenly Arabs aren't going to be like, hey, you know what? We love Jewish people. We hope they live forever and happily and prosper in this region. But how do we get back to some form of mutual détente where there isn't perpetual war going on? Are we close to that? Is that still months away? Is it years away? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think one thing's for sure is that if history is a guide, the Israelis aren't going to slow down here. I mean, you often hear this bandied about where folks say, well, you can't really get rid of Hamas. Hamas is just an idea, and if you get rid of one leader, somebody else will show up. Tell that to Black September. I don't know if your listeners know, Black September was a terror group that was among Israel's premier foes in the 70s and 80s. In fact, during the 1972 Olympic Games, there were 11 athletes that were killed, and it played out on live television all over the world, 11 Israeli athletes. Israel and its security services set the goal of completely eliminating Black September, and methodically, routinely, one after the other, it took them 10 years, and Black September just doesn't exist today. And, Israelis, there's definitely a paradigm change in the security apparatus in Israel. They cannot, the idea of containing threats no longer exists. So you're going to see a relentless, methodical campaign to eliminate the threats and the leadership. It's not going to slow down from here. You're just going to see more and more and more of this. And I think at some point, the leadership will be so debilitated that they will have to slow down. And that's when you're going to see things start to settle.
And if things start to settle down, what does that look like from an American perspective? That means that what should happen in terms of America being an ally of Israel, from your perspective?
Well, I think, what Israel wants from an ally, and I think what all allies would want from each other is really support, to listen and to hear, the concerns and what they're going through and where they can be helpful. I mean, one thing that is quite unique about the Israel-U.S. alliance is that Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically underlined this in his speech to Congress recently, we don't want American troops, or, this is what Israelis will say, we don't want American troops. We don't want, there's a lot of business that's done. Obviously, there's military aid, which most of it is spent in the United States, and that helps support the U.S. military industry. But really, it's we want, the Israelis are saying, we want to get the job done. We want to do it ourselves. And, we appreciate your backing and your support and your assistance in that. What we've seen now with the Biden administration sort of slowing down weapons shipments and things like that, sort of withholding that support, is a turn towards, Israeli domestic production. So right now, and this hasn't really been widely reported, there is a huge push in Israel to build domestic weapons production capabilities, in particular mortars and tank shells and other kind of munitions that Israel would typically rely on the Americans for. And I think, back to the question you asked about sort of what the election means, under the Obama years, you saw Israel, focusing on building relations with others around the globe, with India and we saw the first trips to Africa and Singapore and Latin America. So, a good U.S.-Israel relationship is the product of, what you'd expect from supportive allies, an approach that you'd expect from supportive allies, which, certainly under the Joe Biden administration, it's very qualified. And under the Harris administration, I think it would be even more so.
Dovid Efune, publisher of the New York Sun, we appreciate you coming into the New York City studio and sharing all this breakdown with all of us.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And I just mentioned that we were supposed to be in the air headed to Israel right now, and we were going to be helping to advance the cause of the IFCJ. That's the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. With all the tensions going on, they canceled our flight to be able to go to Israel. Most of, I believe, the flights to Israel, if not all of them, from the United States right now are all shut down. And the fact is that many Jewish people are still under direct attack rather than being able to live their lives in total freedom, as all of us want them to be able to do. IFCJ does all they can to help Israeli citizens. You can join us in donating what you can to the IFCJ and thank them for helping to meet the urgent security needs of everyone in Israel. It was interesting. One of the things we did was we were able to meet the leadership of the IFCJ down in South Florida this week. Went to a meeting, and I was blown away by the bravery of so many of the leaders of organizations. Also, the testimony of what the impact of these donations have meant in terms of being able to protect innocent Israelis and the battles that Yael, the founder there, does fight every single day on behalf of the Jewish people. You can make a tremendous gift right now at 888-488-IFCJ. Thanks to a generous IFCJ supporter, your gift will be matched, doubling your impact. 888-488-IFCJ. That's 4325. You can also go online to supportifcj.org to give. That's one word, supportifcj.org. Israel needs your support now.